Welcome to Impact Makers Radio, helping you to find jargon-free information before choosing a professional to help solve your problems and live the life you love. And here's your host, Stuart Andrew Alexander.
Hi and welcome to another Let's Talk Divorce conversation. And on this segment of the show, ladies and gentlemen, I am so pleased that we finally have collaborative family law attorney Joryn Jenkins, who is the owner of Open Palm Law, calling in all the way from sunny Tampa, Florida. Now, Joryn, who is considered to be a leader in the area of collaborative law, will be talking to you today about a very interesting topic. You see, Joryn has taken the time out of her busy day to come and speak to us about changing the way the world gets divorced. So, if you are one of the many people in the Tampa, Florida area, and you're out there looking for easy to understand, jargon-free information surrounding your divorce-related situation, then you might just want to down tools, take a break, log out of Facebook, stop the Twittering and Instagramming, or anything else you happen to be doing which may cause a distraction. And, something you may even want to grab yourself a notepad and pen and get ready to take some copious notes as we listen in to what Joryn has to share with us today. So, with that said, let's not keep you waiting a moment longer. She's a very busy lady. Welcome to the show, Joryn.
Thanks, Stuart.
Why are you laughing?
Oh, because it's Friday afternoon, and I'm looking forward to a weekend of a little bit of downtime, primarily because most of my cases these days are collaborative, and we just don't run into the same issues that we traditionally run into in the courtroom divorce cases, where our clients are calling us just frantic because they aren't getting their weekend visitation.
Right, that sounds great, and I'm sure you're going to expand on that throughout our discussion today. So before we jump in and get started then with the meat and potatoes, as we like to say in the UK, it goes without saying that anything you share with us today, Joryn, is not any form of legal advice or legal assistance. It's purely for the purpose of disseminating general information. Now, would you just care to expand on that in your own words, please, Joryn, so that everybody knows exactly what we're doing today?
Oh, it's so funny because I know you're not expecting this answer. One of the things that I tell my clients in collaborative cases is the law should be your last resort. So in my collaborative cases, I'm not a champion on a white knight charging forward with my lance ready to do war. I am a counselor and help folks do their own decision-making in the collaborative law process. And we rarely talk about what the law says because I think that the law is there in case the parents, the spouses, the parties, whatever you want to call them, I call them the clients, can't get to an agreement. The collaborative law process is one way of getting to agreement. There are others that I also use, but I especially like the collaborative law process because my clients always come out of the process better people, better parents, better at problem solving, brainstorming, communicating, and co-parenting.
So, Joryn, tell us a little bit about your company, Open Palm Law, and especially the people who you serve. You've kind of alluded a little bit to that, and the various types of situations that they find themselves in when they come to you for your help.
Most people think that the collaborative law process is only for certain types of people. It's only for rich people. It's only for celebrities. It's only for people who've already agreed to everything already. And that's just not the truth. It's for anybody getting divorced. It can be someone who suffered from a domestic violence incident. It can be for someone who's poverty-stricken. It can be for anybody, people who can't agree on anything. The collaborative law process can help any of these people. These days, the clients that I have, they decide if they want to try collaborative. I may have a client who does, and his or her spouse may not, which is unfortunate because they have to agree on the process. The only process they don't have to agree on is if they're going to court, then the other guy has to go to court with them. There's just no choice. But if they both agree to mediate, they can mediate. If they both agree to collaborate, they can collaborate. There's any number of different approaches, and if they're on the same page, at least as far as the approach goes, we can get them on the same page with the rest of their lives as well.
So, Joryn, what would be the advantages then of being aware of the various types of ways that people can get divorced these days?
Well, that's an excellent question, because 20 years ago, oh dear, it's more than 20. I got divorced. Yeah, I was married very briefly, and I got divorced, and I didn't do divorce work at that time. I didn't start out in divorce work. I started out in commercial litigation. I was a prosecutor for a while. I was a law professor for a while, and I did a lot of commercial litigation. But when I started, before I started doing marital work, I went to a lawyer to get my divorce, and I said, I need a divorce. No children, no real estate. It's not a problem. It's not a big issue. And he goes, fine, I'll file a petition. And I looked at him and I said, are you kidding me? I have to go to court to get divorced. Now, here I am. I'm a lawyer, and I didn't realize that you have to go to court to get divorced. I said to him, I didn't have to go to court to get married. Why do I have to go to court to get divorced?
Right, makes sense, yeah.
He was like, well, but because that's the way we do it. That's the way we do it. And times have changed since then. That was 30 years ago. So now we do mediation, and I think everybody in the country is required to go to mediation before they're allowed to go to trial. But we also have this thing called collaborative divorce. We also have this other thing, cooperating. We also have kitchen table divorce. And I think it's critical that people don't go to a lawyer now and say, I want a divorce, and they say, fine, I'll file a petition. The first thing your lawyer should tell you is, okay, you have a bunch of choices. Here are the choices. I have a poster that I created that outlines the choices that you have in process. And I walk my clients, my prospective clients, through these processes. I had a client last week say to me, can I have a copy of your poster? I want to take it to my husband and explain this to him. So they know that they have choices, and that's what's critical. Clients need to know that they have a choice. They don't have to go to court. They don't have to go to war. They don't have to spend $100,000 to get divorced.
So, Joryn, both you and I know that if anybody wants to find out anything about a particular topic, any kind of subject, they only need to crack open their laptop and go to Google and start researching and come up with all kinds of information. So, with that said, because when they do find that information, it's not always, or, often it's not true. There can be some misconceptions around that kind of information that they find. Oh, sure. So with that said then, Joryn, what do you feel are, and I know there's going to be so many that you could share with us, but what do you feel are three of the biggest myths out there when it comes to how people can get divorced? What are some of the myths that you come across on a regular basis?
Well, the most critical one is that people assume they have to go to court. I assumed, silly me, I was a lawyer 30 years ago. I assumed you didn't have to go to court. But I think today, everybody assumes you have to go to court. Everybody assumes it's going to cost you a lot of money. Everybody assumes it's going to be a war. And it just doesn't have to be that way. All those three fallacies are just that. They're incorrect. And I think people are starting to realize that now. We went through a period where that was all true, but I think now that collaborative divorce is out there, Florida just finally passed a collaborative divorce statute. It took 7 years for us to get that passed. Wow. And the funny thing is, it took 7 years. Despite that, it's telling the courts, we're going to save you money. We're going to get rid of your cases before they have come in and sit on your docket. We're not going to cost the state anything. It doesn't cost the state anything to do collaborative, nothing more than it usually costs when you file a case. Because in the end of the day, you have to file your marital settlement agreement in order to get that final judgment from a judge. But any way you get to that marital settlement agreement is how we're saving the courts money, because we're not doing them in the courts. We're doing them in the conference rooms. We're doing them at the kitchen table. We're doing them at home. And so we're saving money. Why it took so long to get a statute passed, I have no clue. But the statutes are out there now. I think 2/3 of the country, maybe 1/3, I'm not positive, have collaborative law statutes. So you can look those up. You can do that research. But you got to watch out for the trial lawyers who talk bad about it. That's the one problem we have out there now.
So, Joryn, do you feel that collaborative divorce, the whole collaborative process in of itself, is something that's becoming more top of mind when people start looking at their options for divorce?
I think it's becoming better known. Part of the problem that we have is that the name of our process is not an easy name. Collaborative. It's collaborative. Oh my God, it's 5 syllables long.
Exactly.
And the word collaborative has become suddenly very popular in the last few years. And I don't know if it's because of collaborative divorce or because it's become popular on its own. We have a collaborative economy. I have a friend who wrote a book called Collaborative Economy, and he's not talking anything about divorce. And so, people aren't sure what collaborative divorce is. It's a very specific kind of process. We cooperate. Lots of attorneys are nice to each other, and we cooperate with each other, and we get people divorced as cheaply as we can. But collaborative is where the attorneys sign an agreement that they will not go to court. They are promising to only work on getting the spouses to an agreement. And by doing that, we take the tendency for lawyers to kind of stir things up. We're taking that tendency away from them. We're making them focus on agreement only. We're not holding anything back so we can sandbag the other side. We're not saving anything for, well, if we go to court, I want to be able to spring this on her. All our cards are on the table. This process is totally transparent. We have financial neutral usually in the process. We have some mental health people sometimes in the process facilitating. And so it's a very specialized kind of process.
So, Joryn, please share 3 of the common misconceptions there is about your industry that you come across on a day-to-day basis.
Oh gosh, that's interesting. Because I've practiced all kinds of. I did appellate work, I did bankruptcy work, I did commercial work, and it was a while before I settled into the family law sphere where I really feel like I can do good. The rest of the time we're busy taking things apart. In family law, we can actually be putting things together. Instead of destroying families, I can restructure them, and I can help people rebuild their relationships. So, it's a very positive kind of work that I do. But I think with most lawyers, it's not. Most lawyers, I think the public knows that lawyers are there to clean up the mess and to sever relationships. You have a breach of contract. That's because people aren't getting along. They're not performing. And so one side's going to get damages. The other side doesn't want to pay them. You have a breach of partnership agreement. People are breaking up. That's like a marriage. It's breaking up. We can do collaborative breach of contract or breach of partnership, but people don't think of that. You have an employment discrimination case. That's another relationship that's broken down. So lawyers are seen as champions for one side, and they're seen as the horror for the other side. They see that guy as the enemy. I've had a rock thrown through my sign down at the office because I was seen as the bad guy, because that's what I had to do when I was a trial attorney. I am still an aggressive trial attorney. I know what to do. I know how to do my work. I just don't enjoy that work anymore. Right,
because sometimes you have to be that aggressive attorney, right? Depending on what kind of case that you're representing, right?
Yeah, if you have clients who cannot agree on a process, then you're going to court, and I still have those cases. Yeah.
Okay, Joryn, so we're talking about changing the way the world gets divorced. That's your topic for today. So with that in mind, what are some of your clients' most common fears about getting divorced in the first place?
Well, it's a huge unknown. It's huge. I mean, that's when I talk to people about I talk to collaborative professionals about how to market their services. And one of the things that I teach is that it's critical that they be able to answer those questions that the clients have that they sometimes don't even know that they have. Right. What's it going to cost me? How long is it going to take me? Am I be able to stay in my house? How much time am I going to have with my kids? Are they going to take my kids away from me? Who's going to make the decision? Some judge who doesn't even know me, doesn't know my kids, doesn't share my values? I mean, these questions are... And we all think, well, that's not such a big deal, but change is very hard for us. We all know this. I'm not telling anyone who's listening a surprise when I say, think about the worst things that can happen to you. One of them is someone close to you dying. Another one, stress factors, right? Christmas, for example, is it's one of the top 10. Divorce is one of the top 10, close to the top. And divorce is really near the top because it's also death. It's death of a relationship that when you entered into that relationship, you thought that was going to last forever, and it's dying. And the worst part about it is that your spouse isn't under the ground. Your spouse is still walking around, maybe being mean to you, and it's just the most stressful thing that can happen to you.
So how can they get past those fears then? Can you just share some examples of what they could actually do when they fear getting divorced?
Well, the most important thing is to get a consult with a lawyer or two or three. I never suggest to people that they hire the first person they talk to. And if that first person is me, I tell them, go look around, see who you connect with. It's very important that you can connect with the lawyer that you choose. And then make sure that whoever you consult with, that they tell you about the different choices of process, because that's critical. And they need to be able to answer those fears that you have. So if your biggest fear is that your wife is going to take all your money, talk about that. Talk about, I had this much before I got married. I made this much while I was married. How much of that might she have a claim to? How much do I want to give her? Think about your goals and interests. You're the one who's looking to get a divorce. What is it that you want to have when you're done being divorced? The most important thing I tell my clients is, I want you to sit and close your eyes for a minute and tell me what your life looks like in 5 years. What does that look like for you? What kind of house are you living in? What kind of relationship do you have with your kids? What kind of relationship do you have with your ex-husband, if he's your ex-husband? That's critical to focus on what your future looks like. Stop worrying about what's happened in the past. It's done. If you've decided to get the divorce, then let's talk about the cost. Let's talk about the likely length of time it'll take. Let's talk about process, and let's talk about getting the spouse into the same process that you decide you want and how we do that. So it's problem solving. Problem solving always addresses those fears, because now we're telling you how we're going to fix all of those fears. They're not going to happen the way you think, the way you fear they will. We're going to do it this way.
So we spoke earlier on then, Joryn, about some of the myths out there where people tend to believe that, the divorce process has to be, you have to go to court, you have to dog it out, it's going to cost a lot of money, you need a pit bull terrier of an attorney, and that the collaborative process as an alternative is not quite there yet, where it's 100% top of mind. So with that said then, Joryn, what other perceived obstacles do you see that might be preventing people from seeking the help of a collaborative family law attorney?
Well, the biggest one is, it's unfortunate that I say this, the biggest one is the trial lawyers. So in your normal divorce, it can cost upwards of $100,000 for a husband or a wife to get divorced in court. If you mediate, it might run you about $5,000. If you mediate with lawyers, it might be a little bit more. Without lawyers, it might be a little bit less. And you don't have to have lawyers when you mediate. If you do a kitchen table divorce, it'll cost you the filing fee. There are forms out there that anybody can use. If you have kids, it might be a little too hard to use those forms. You might need an attorney to explain the forms to you, or to help you fill them out, or to draft a marital settlement agreement for you. All of these processes will cost you a lot less than going to court. Like I said, upwards of $100,000 for each side. A collaborative divorce is going to run you probably in the neighborhood of $30,000. Depends on what part of the country you are, what your standard of living is in that part of the country, that kind of thing. But it can be $30,000 for both of you, by the way, for all four professionals in the process. So typically in a collaborative divorce, one of the lawyers, make about $10,000. And that's the problem, because I will make $100,000 if I encourage you to go to court, but I'll only make $10,000 if I encourage you to do a collaborative divorce. And the problem is that the trial lawyers see me taking the work away from them. Anytime I convince my client to go collaborate, then I've gotten work for another collaborative lawyer to represent his or her spouse, and I've taken a case away from two trial lawyers.
So how would one be able to spot? Are there any telltale signs that an attorney is leaning more towards litigation, taking it to court, so that they may be able to benefit from the amount of money that could be made from that? What are some of the telltale signs?
Well, if they've not been trained collaboratively, there is a very easy 2-day training that any collaborative professional, whether it's a lawyer or a financial or a facilitator, we all go through the same training. And if they have not been trained, then they probably have no interest in knowing how to collaborate and they want to go to trial. If they never mention the word collaborative to you, then they probably want to go to trial. If they ask you questions like, well, don't you think that you're entitled to alimony?
Right.
You might be entitled to alimony, but they're not asking questions in the right way, in my opinion. Instead of asking you if you don't think you're entitled to alimony, I would say to you, how much do you make? Are you capable of supporting yourself? Have you worked in recent years? I would ask questions that circle around are you entitled to alimony? Really getting to the heart of the matter. Do you need alimony? That can he or she afford alimony? Which is really what it all boils down to. Do you want to be supported by another person for the rest of your life, or do you want to be out on your own? That's a good question too. So trial lawyers ask questions that kind of push you towards the courtroom. I ask questions more oriented towards what are your real goals and interests.
So I guess listening to your own gut as well is something to keep in mind, right? Because I can just imagine maybe someone going through the divorce process using a trial lawyer, and then a couple of years down the line, they've spent 100, 200 grand, and they sit back and think, what in the world happened there? I knew something was not quite right. So I think gut instinct, as well as those questions that you just shared with us, those great questions to ask, right?
Well, I think you're absolutely right. And one of the one of the problems is that I have clients all the time who tell me, my wife will never spend 100 grand, or my husband would never do that to me. And then we get into the litigation, and I tell them, you don't know what the other lawyer is going to do. You don't know what the judge is going to do. And so once you're in litigation, you totally lose control. And your wife might not have wanted to do that thing, but she ended up doing it because her lawyer told her she should. So that's the problem. People lose control, and they get the bill and it's 5 grand, and the next month it's 10 grand, and then the next month it's 8 grand, because they didn't have any control.
Right. So very important to keep your own ego in check, right? Right. So, Joryn, please share an example of how you've been able to help someone to succeed in getting the results they wanted by using the collaborative process. Now, I know there are hundreds, possibly even thousands of people that you've helped throughout your career, but if you could just share one, and obviously keeping your clients' confidentiality in mind, I think that would be great for our listeners just to hear that from you.
I can tell you stories. So it's so funny because I think that there's magic in the collaborative conference room. I have seen the most amazing things. I had a client, we could not get his wife to go see a lawyer. He moved out. He was done. They'd been married for 20 years. They'd never had kids. She didn't want kids. And he was done. So he moved out, and I sent her, he talked to her. She won't go see a lawyer. I sent her a letter. She won't go see a lawyer. I send her another letter. She's ignoring me. We try and call her. She's ignoring me. So he apparently emptied the bank account, and I didn't know it. But all of a sudden, she went to one of the lawyers that I had recommended, because I don't hesitate. People say to me, okay, can you recommend a lawyer for my spouse? I give them a list of lawyers that I've worked with, that I admire, that I know do a good job. And quite often they actually will hire one of the people on my list. So she calls this lawyer. He calls me up. He says, okay, we're in the process. She's agreed to it. We show up at the first meeting, and she's crying, and she's crying, and she's crying. And my client is getting more and more upset. He finally whispers in my ear, I told you she was going to do this. She's making everybody hate me. She's making me the bad guy. This isn't fair. And I looked at him and I said, wait a second. No, time out. And the facilitator looked at me and she said, do you want to take a break? And I said, yes. So we step out into the hallway, and he's all upset. And I said to him, look, the process isn't about turning the other professionals against you. We don't take sides. Other than I'm your lawyer and Adam is her lawyer, we don't take sides. But tell me, why is she crying? And he said, I emptied the bank account. And I said, why? And he said, because I couldn't get her to see a lawyer. So she went to the lawyer when I emptied the bank. I said, okay. Can you put the money back? He said, yes, of course I can put the money back. I said, okay. He said, I'm sorry I hurt her feelings. I didn't mean to do it, but I had to get her to see a lawyer. I said, can you tell her you're sorry? He said, well, of course I can. I said, okay, let's do that. So we walk back in the conference room, and he doesn't even sit down. He leans over the back of his chair. He looks her in the face, and he says, I'm so sorry I hurt your feelings. I will put the money back. I just want you to see a lawyer. And it was like everyone in the room was electrified. She stops crying. Gosh. The financial guy at the other end of the table goes, when can you do that? Of course, he's right on top of it. And he goes, I'll have it done by 5 o'clock today. So it was just the fact that she was afraid because he'd emptied the bank account and she was hurt. He apologized. And she didn't cry. We had 3 more meetings before we resolved that divorce, and she didn't cry once, not once. I had another case. Where somebody, trying to remember now, what was it? Oh, it was The Secret. I called it The Secret. Oh my gosh, this was one. So had been separated for years, had 2 kids, and he paid his child support on time every time. But child support pending their divorce. They'd never filed for divorce. He just was paying child support. And then apparently he stopped giving her extra money. And so she decided she wanted to divorce. So we started a collaborative process. They both agreed to it. And we're in the first meeting, and his lawyer turns to him. We talked about goals and interests. They both wanted the kids to go to college. Neither of them had gone to college. No one in their families had. They wanted both their kids to go to college, and they wanted them to be happy and, all that wonderful butterflies and rainbows stuff, which people think is so mushy. But we talk about that. We do. And then the lawyer says to him, do you want to share what you told me, that thing that you told me? And the guy turned away from the rest of us. He turns towards his lawyer and he says, okay. And he's talking to the facilitator and the lawyer, but he's not talking about or me. But he clearly was nervous about talking to us. And he says, I got arrested 5 years ago for getting a job when I was on unemployment. I didn't know I wasn't allowed to. I thought I was only not allowed to work for the railroad while I was unemployed, because that's where he worked. But apparently I was not allowed to even have a part-time job with 7-Eleven. And I was brought up on charges. They arrested me, and I pled guilty. I had to pay a lawyer. I had to pay back all of the unemployment, and I just haven't had any extra cash to give her. Now, mind you, she's sitting right there, but he's talking to the lawyer. I haven't had any extra cash to give her for the last 5 years, and I didn't want to tell her why, because I was embarrassed. Meanwhile, my client is sitting next to me, and she's bouncing her leg like she's angry. And I said to her, let's take a break. So we go in the other room, and I said, why are you angry? And she said, because we were always best friends. Even when we separated, we were best friends. And he should have been able to tell me. I don't understand why he couldn't tell me. And I said to her, don't you understand? It was because you respect so much. And it was like the light dawned on her. You could see. Right? And he was so afraid that he would lose the respect of his own children, that it would get twisted. Because, of course, if it had gone to court, it would have been twisted. Exactly. This guy made a mistake. He made a mistake. And, and it cost him dearly. He had to empty his 401k to pay the lawyer. Then he had to pay back all the unemployment that he'd gotten for like a year. But they got divorced. Now, this woman, by the way, the reason they were getting divorced was because she had decided that she was a lesbian and she was living with a woman. We get them divorced, and we have to go down to the courthouse to get the final judgment. And we all go. The whole team decided to go because we wanted to be supportive. We're walking out of the courthouse afterwards, and she throws her arms around his neck, and she says, I hope you know I will always love you.
It's amazing.
It was amazing. It made us all cry. Yeah, it was amazing.
You nearly got me started here, Joryn. Wow. That's powerful.
There's magic in this process.
Definitely.
But it's a magic that comes from learning how to talk about things that are uncomfortable sometimes. Sharing, secrets that you didn't feel comfortable talking about, apologizing for things. I've had cases where people cheated on the marriage, cheated with another person, and they apologized. And the apology was what was necessary. It doesn't undo the harm, but there's a certain harm that comes from hiding a secret And it does undo that harm because there's no longer a secret. And sometimes they can actually explore why this meeting took place. It's funny because it's kind of almost like counseling. It's really not, but because we're getting people divorced, we're raising marriages back together because the damage is done. It's water under the bridge, but we're repairing the relationship so that they can go forward as parents.
And people find some sense of closure then, what I could imagine with the collaborative process, as opposed to going to trial and yes, you get the divorce and yes, you get the house or whatever the case may be, but internally on a subconscious level, spiritually, I can't imagine a sense of closure there. There's still maybe some, element of bitterness or some element of loss. Am I on the right lines there?
Absolutely. Yeah. No, there's no question about it. Yeah. It's interesting because I stay in touch with many of my clients, and I have had several of my women clients from litigation who I tried in the process of litigating to convince them that keeping the house was not a good idea, but they were suffering such loss. Relocating, moving out of your home is another one of those huge stressors, just like divorce. And so I find that in litigation, many times especially my women clients, they want to keep the house, and they only want to keep it because it's safety, it's security, it's one thing that's not changing. Right. But they come back to me years later and they say, you were right. I shouldn't have kept the house. It was a mistake. Now that things have calmed down and I'm not in the stress of litigation, I realize that, and I wish I had listened to you. Right. But in the collaborative process, I'm much better able to counsel my clients and have them actually hear me.
So, ladies and gentlemen, as a reminder, my guest today is collaborative family law attorney Joryn Jenkins, and her topic is changing the way the world gets divorced. Now, going by her track record and everything she shared with us today, she's certainly been doing that for quite some time. And so with that in mind, and for those people who are listening in right now, then Joryn, could you maybe just share one or two rarely talked about pitfalls or even common mistakes that they need to keep in mind regardless of what kind of situations they find themselves in?
Don't let the stress make your decisions for you. You need to, the most important thing I think in anything having to do with divorce is to somehow calm yourself down. That may be by exercising. It may be by spending quality time with your kids. It may be by calling your mom up and having dinner with her. But doing yoga, do things, take care of yourself and lower your stress levels before you make any important decision. I think that's probably the most critical piece of advice that I give people, no matter what divorce process they're in.
So, Joryn, when you think back to all of the clients who you've worked with and helped to achieve the transformation that they were looking for, because essentially that's what you are. I mean, even your title is a collaborative family law attorney. Essentially, you're a transformationalist. You take people from point A to point B. So when you think back to all of those people who you've helped, on a deep down personal level then, Joryn, what does that give you? I mean, how does that make you feel?
Well, it's not the same for everybody. Sometimes, especially with the litigation, I feel sad. I mean, I've had clients who spent tons of money and were never happy with their results, even after I won and I won and I won. I mean, I had a case where I was representing the mom and we were in litigation for 5 years. I got her custody most of the time. I got her, she wanted time sharing 5 days a week, and that's what I got her. Dad had weekends. He had 3 weekends a month. And after the first trial, he appealed because he wanted the weekdays and he wanted her just to have an occasional weekend. And the reason it was like that was because they lived 50 miles away from each other. But in any event, I got her what she wanted. He appealed. We did the appeal. I won the appeal. He immediately gave her back one of the weekends. So he only had 2 weekends a month, even though he'd appealed. And then he litigated over something else. We went through this 4 times. We did 4 appeals. We won every one. We were back in court again, something about contempt or something, I don't remember. Meanwhile, the kid has gone from 2 years old to 7 years old. And then it got quiet, and it got quiet. And I called my client and I said, I haven't heard anything from the opposing lawyer lately. By the way, the husband had gone through 10 lawyers during this process. 10. Wow. My client, I was her second lawyer. And I stayed her second lawyer the whole time. And I call her on the phone and I say, it's gone quiet. It's gone dark. What's going on? And she calls me back a week later and she says, Grandpa died. Well, the thing is that we had known that Grandpa was really driving the boat. It wasn't about the husband at all. It was his father, who was a lawyer, who was a brigadier general, and who was used to getting his way. And he was drafting the pleadings. He was paying the lawyers. Sometimes they would file pleadings that weren't even signed, which I could tell the brigadier general had drafted himself because they were poorly written. So you might think, okay, she should be happy. But she ended up filing bankruptcy after she paid me $100. She paid me $100. Then she paid me, then husband ended up paying me $50, and she filed bankruptcy owing me $200 and owing all her credit cards. She maxed them out to pay me. And I mean, it was just a horrifying situation for her, but she was protecting her kid, and I knew that she wouldn't be able to pay me. Some of the representation I did knowing full well that I was just in it because I admired her, I respected her, and I didn't want to leave her hanging. So, we do these litigation things, and quite often we're unhappy because nobody wins in court. Nobody wins. Nobody gets that. You don't really win in court no matter what happens. But in collaboration, people do win. They walk out. I had a client leave the collaboration. Now, this was a client, you have to understand, in the first meeting, she went running out of my conference room, running through the waiting room, out into the parking lot. I ran out after her, and I found her crying in the parking lot. What's going on? He won't listen to me. He never listens to me. He can't hear me. Please come back in the conference room. We'll help him hear you. That's why we're here. So we go back in. We get the divorce done. 3 meetings later, we walk out, and I debrief my clients because I want to know what they thought. She says to me, I learned to hear my husband again. I learned to listen to him. It just sounds different when someone else says the same thing he said, exactly. Which I thought that was kind of shocking, since she complained that he wasn't hearing her. But then when she wanted to tell me how good the process was, it was because she had learned to listen to him. He came out, and his compliment was really short. He said, I came out of my divorce a better person.
Oh, that's powerful.
Kind of makes the hair on your arm stand up, doesn't it? That's powerful.
Yeah, it does. It does. And therein again is proof of the transformation that you create in people's lives. It's just so much more than just getting divorced. It's helping them to find a new platform where they can continue with their lives and have another chance, even though these didn't work the first time around. So that's really interesting. Now,
it's interesting. It's interesting you say that, because I think the statistics. 50% of first marriages end in divorce. 67% of second marriages end in divorce. 74% of third marriages end in divorce. And I think it's because people go to court. If they don't go to court and they learn these problem-solving techniques that we teach them, these brainstorming techniques that we teach them to co-parent, communicate better, I think if they learn this, their second marriages will be a lot better.
Sure. I think it should be mandatory for every divorcing couple to go through the collaborative divorce process.
From your mouth to God's ear.
Yeah, definitely. I'm just going to circle back to something that you mentioned about that. The first client that you were just speaking about, where she wanted to protect her child. So that's actually a good segue into my next question. And it's something that I haven't had the chance to speak to you about before the show, but the very reason for me starting this particular series, Let's Talk Divorce, where I invite divorce professionals like yourself onto the show, is because I myself am a child of divorce. My parents went through a very volatile, a very violent divorce. There was lots of fighting, lots of blood, and that happened when I was only 8 years old. I'm 55 now, going on 56. But the repercussions of that was I ended up blaming myself. I didn't have the resources or the capability to figure out why my mum and dad were at loggerheads with each other, and I blamed myself as a young child and carried the burden and carried the guilt of that throughout my young childhood, through my teenage years, throughout my my young adult years. And it wasn't until I reached my mid-40s or so that I started to really work on the negative impact that my parents' divorce had. So I like to call those children who find themselves in that situation, I like to call them the invisible voices, because they don't have anything to say. They're totally powerless. They don't understand, and they usually put the blame on themselves like I did. So with that said then, Joryn, and I'm sure you've come across this so many times in helping your clients, if there are any listeners out there right now, they're tuning in and they find themselves in that unfortunate position where they are at loggerheads with each other, and they may rightly be so, may have been cheated on, whatever the case may be. However, there are children involved, and as much as they think they can hide that from the children, I can tell them from my own personal experience, we pick up on every single nuance. You can't hide a thing. So if that's the case, then Joryn, and there are couples out there who have children and there is a lot of conflict going on, what would you like to say to them? Because I always like to say, as much as you have every right to be at loggerheads with each other at this particular time in your lives, you have to love your children more than you hate yourselves at this particular moment. Can you just expand on that for them, please, Joryn?
Well, it's funny that you prefaced that with your personal story. When I was 7, my parents divorced. Mm-hmm. My mother loaded me and my 3 younger sisters in the van and drove us 3,000 miles away. And we never saw my father again. Wow. So I didn't have the same. It was a shock. Mm. There was no lead up. My dad moved out of the house, and then we left the country. We left that side of the country and moved all the way across the country, and I never saw him again. But that my mother spent a lot of time telling us what to do in case my father showed up and tried to kidnap us. So I had a different kind of bad situation around my childhood, but you're so right, because of the same result. I thought it was my fault, and it was my fault because I was the oldest kid. There were 4 of us, and I think that one nice thing about being able to do a kitchen table divorce where the 2 of you sit down and work it out, or a cooperative divorce where you have lawyers who like each other and who are focused on getting you to a good agreement, or collaborative especially where you're actually working on communicating and co-parenting skills along with getting to agreement, that really is going to reflect when you go home at night and see your kids, because you're constantly reinforcing that attitude of, we're in this together. We were in the marriage together. Now we're in the divorce together. You don't have to be against each other in the divorce. You can be in the divorce together. And so our clients are really focused on getting to an agreement that they can both accept and that they both find is reasonable, that they are both satisfying their goals and interests, which, quite frankly, we always say are always going to be the kids. They're always, I have yet to have a client who, when we explore goals and interests, the first thing they don't say is, I want my kids to be happy. That's the first thing any client with a kid says. Sure. And we remind them of that all the time. In collaborative cases, I always have a photo of the kids of the conference room table.
Fantastic.
Because they're what it's all about. Because you're absolutely right. All these kids out there, and half the people that I represent are children of divorce too. They know. And we just have to remind them. And that's why they're in the collaborative divorce to begin with, most of the time. Mm-hmm.
So, Joryn, share a little bit about your backstory. What was it that led you or inspired you to become a collaborative family law attorney? Because it's never just a straight road, isn't it? It's never a straight line. You don't wake up one morning and say, I'm going to be a collaborative family law attorney. So what was it that inspired you then to do what you do today? Go ahead, please. Nobody's ever asked me. I do radio shows all the time. Nobody's ever asked me that. I did my first case in 2002, and at that point, I was still really focused. My goal, my personal goal, was to make new law. I loved making new law. I did appeals.
I established a juror's right to a jury trial when a juror had been discriminated against. I was one of the first cases that established that a hospital patient should not have his records revealed to the newspaper. This was years and years ago. So I loved making new law, but I did this collaborative divorce in 2002, and I was just so surprised. It's such a totally different approach. It's not riding off as, on the horse with the lance and the armor. It's working together as a team. It's a really fascinating thing for trial attorneys to suddenly find, oh, we've got this team and we're all working together for this family. It's really for the family. The other attorney, we don't call him opposing counsel anymore. Now we call him our teammate, our other lawyer on the team.
Wow, that's a big mindset shift, isn't it?
It's we call it the paradigm shift. So it's a huge, and so I did that divorce, and then I did another one the same year, but nobody was doing them here really. And the little group of us that was trying to get it off the ground, we just, didn't make much headway. So it kind of lapsed for a few years. And then in 2009, I got another case. And at that point, people were starting to listen. They were starting to prick up their ears and go, I might be interested in trying that. So now I not only do collaborative cases that pay, but I also run a collaborative divorce pro bono where I help other collaborative professionals get their first cases. They volunteer. It's volunteer. Our clients are volunteers. The professionals are volunteers. They get their first cases. I train collaborative professionals to market their collaborative services because lawyers have no idea how to sell their services. They don't even like to hear the word sell. And neither do the mental health people, the facilitators. They have no clue how to sell their services. So I do that. My entire practice is really focused on, even though I still am doing trial work, it's really focused around, I've created 14 posters for the process. I've got a banner. I've got, it's kind of silly. I've written 9 books. Well, no, I've written 7 books, and then I have 2 collaborative divorce anthologies that I put together by other professionals. I wrote a book called War or Peace that's all stories about what going to court looks like versus what collaborating looks like. Right. And I've been told that it's an excellent read. I'm not saying it myself because I'm too familiar with it, but I've been told it's a really good book.
Joryn, I just want to jump back to something you said about how the collaborative attorneys that you work with don't really embrace marketing themselves, and I think you also said the medical professionals you work with also, and I'd just like to just add something to that. And even though this show is targeted more at people who are considering their options for divorce, there may be 1 or 2 of those people who you help, those professionals who you help to market themselves. So my message to you is this. Now, you may think that, the word marketing is a dirty word, all right, for lack of a better term. But consider this. If you don't put yourself in that position or do something to get help, to place yourself in that position where the people who need you the most can easily find you and connect with you, then consider this. That you are actually doing them a disservice because they are most likely going to go and find a service elsewhere that in most cases is going to be inferior to yours because you are great at what you do, right? So it's absolutely your duty. I have something that I'm working on myself. I say, lift yourself up and out of obscurity. It's your absolute duty to do that because you are following your God-given gift to be a collaborative attorney or, a family law attorney. That's your gift. You do that easily. But if you can't market yourself, then, it's absolutely your duty to seek help with that through people like Joryn, to put yourself in that position where people can benefit from your expertise. So I just wanted to throw that one in there because I do find that sad, when you have somebody who has these great skills but remain, in the depths of obscurity because they just feel that selling and marketing themselves is just not something, we don't do that,
That's
just
so well
rely
said.
on referrals and people will find us.
Yeah. And that's what I did for years. I relied on referrals. the American Bar Association did an article in one of the journal the magazine, and it was about me and how I marketed, and it was all it was all lawyers. Other lawyers would send me cases, and that's the way of the past. That you cannot sell your services that way anymore. And you are so right. You are doing your potential clients, a disservice by not letting them know that you're there.
That said then, Joryn, please share a lesson that you may have learned earlier on in your career that still influences how you do business today.
Everybody makes mistakes. It's how you recover from them that makes the difference. I told my daughter this. You could ask my daughter, what's Joryn's favorite phrase that she coined? And she'll tell you, because I used to do legal malpractice. Yeah. And I mean, I own the building that I practice in because of a fee in a $1 million legal malpractice case that I handled. And I truly believe, though, it doesn't, whether you're talking divorce or practicing law or practicing medicine, it's not whether you're going to make a mistake, because you will. Everybody makes mistakes. It's how you recover.
Right. So, in your experience then, Joryn, what are some of the most important things people should consider when evaluating a collaborative family law attorney?
Well, as I mentioned before, I think critical is that you connect, that you feel like this person gets you, because that is going to be important. This is going to be your counsel. This is going to be the person you're going to rely on to help you make decisions. And the neutrals on the team will also help you with that, but the lawyer is the one who's in your corner with you. And so that's the one you want to make sure that you connect with. That's probably the most important thing. I mean, you should also look at fees and years of experience. And I found that originally when we first started doing this work, it was the older lawyers who were doing the work who had realized, I think, that going to court was not as attractive as they thought it was when they were younger, and mostly because of the results, because the results are never good. No matter whether you win or lose, the results are never good. But we're now finding that there are younger people who are starting to pick up on this, that they're going, I don't even want to go to court in the first place because I can see that I'm a child of divorce, or, I can just see that this is a much better process for people. So you can look at years of experience that may be important to you. So those typical kinds of things that you look at. Is the office friendly and warm? I find a lot of lawyers are they're stupid about their offices. I'm sorry. They decorate them like they're mausoleums, because that's how we always thought that it was supposed to be done. Right. My office is Tommy Bahama all the way, because that's who I am. So my office is very friendly. I have sofas. You can sit in the corner with a reading lamp and look at a book. My conference room I don't have certificates up anymore. Those are cold and scary looking. I have posters up, and I have Florida artwork up. So you can gauge more about the professional sometimes from his staff and from his office surroundings. So pay attention to all of that, and don't just jump at the first person you interview. You don't have to hire the first person you meet.
I think a good one that is something that I always keep an eye out for when I'm looking to hire a professional is what they're actually doing when I'm speaking to them. Are they still on their mobile phone? Are they still doing other things? Or are they totally focused on me? Because I think that's a reflection of how they will handle my case in the future. Am I on the right lines there, Joryn?
Yeah, absolutely. That's one reason why, and these days it's imperative. I always meet with my consults in my conference room. One, because I have posters up that help me explain answers to their questions. Right. And I have them all up in the conference room. But the other reason is because the computer is it's like a magnet for your eyes. Yeah. It's really hard to not look at the computer when you're talking to someone sitting in front of you at your desk. And so I advise my clients, my lawyer clients, to meet with their prospective clients in the conference room for that very reason. You're so right.
Well, those are some great tips, Joryn, and I'm sure that anyone listening right now will want to know more about how you're changing the way the world gets divorced. So if that's the case and someone feels that they need to dig a little bit deeper and find out more, what would be first of all, the best way to get in touch with you? And then secondly, and something that I find really important is what will actually happen when they do get in touch with you? Because, sometimes you listen to a show like this, or you'll go on a website and it says, contact us for more information. But subconsciously you're thinking, well, what's going to actually happen when I do that? What will happen when I pick up the phone? Are they going to hit me over the head with the Fred Flintstone Club and drag me to the back of the office by my hair and sell me everything under the sun, empty my purse? So please just paint the picture. I'm obviously metaphorically speaking, but paint the picture of, what will actually happen so they know there's no risk to take the next step, please, then, Joryn.
Well, I talk to people all the time. I get calls from California. It's kind of weird. I'm here in Florida. I have actually 7 or 8 clients in California right now. I'm not exactly sure why. LA area. There's
Right.
I have an affinity with that, but I get calls and people just want to know because of some show like this. They want to know, tell me more about this process. These are my circumstances. Do you think it'll work? What should I do? And I talk to people all the time. I do, it's not really a consult. I don't consider it a consult, but you could call it a free consult on the phone, just because I think it's critical that for me to help change the way the world gets divorced, I spread the word every way I can. And if that means I'm picking up the phone and answering somebody's questions, I'm happy to do that. Anybody can reach me through Joryn at openpalmlaw.com. It's open palm as like in an open hand because I say an open hand holds more than a closed fist. And I'm always on the computer except when I'm with a consult.
Right.
You can email me and I can answer your questions, or you can go to openpalmlaw.com and you can find me through the website.
Okay, fantastic. Well, Joryn, we could sit here and talk all day long. I really just feel we just began to scrape the tip of the iceberg with the amount of information and great insights that you could have shared with us today. However, we are out of time. Could you believe that, Joryn? Oh,
No.
Just want to keep talking. I love this topic. Anyway, let me just remind everybody, we have been listening to collaborative family law attorney Joryn Jenkins. Thank you so much for sharing so generously with us today, Joryn. You have certainly demonstrated that you are a true educator, advocate, and trustworthy advisor for your client's success. So thank you so much.
Stuart, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
You are so welcome, my dear, and I'd also like to take a moment to say a big thank you to you. Yes, our listener. Without you, well, we wouldn't have anybody to speak to, and we'd be sat here twiddling our little thumbs. So thank you also for joining us on this, what I can only describe as a very insightful and informative discussion with one of the leading collaborative family law attorneys in the Tampa, Florida area today. Again, her name is Joryn Jenkins. Make sure you do check her out, ladies and gentlemen. Give her a call, visit her website. There are some amazing resources on there. After listening to Joryn today, I am absolutely sure that whatever you decide to do, you are going to be in a great place to start addressing your current situation. So that's it for today, folks. Again, my name is Stuart Andrew Alexander, and I'm just so over the moon with Joryn today. She's so good. I think she's so good. I'm going to file for divorce just so I can be your client, Joryn. How does that sound?
It's not worth it.
Not worth it? Okay. I'll take your word for it. Anyway, once again, my name is Stuart Alexander. We've had lots of fun today, and we're going to be back shortly with some more leading divorce professionals in this, our series of Let's Talk Divorce Conversations. So, until then, take care, have a great day, and we'll talk real soon.
Thank you for tuning in to Impact Makers Radio. To listen to all past, present and future industry thought leaders and trendsetters, visit us at impactmakersradio.com.